We are live. Hi, everybody.
Hello, Rabbi.
So the first thing we have to do is make a l'chaim, everybody.
L'chaim.
L'chaim, good things should happen. We should have some more light in this darkness, and that's what we're talking about now, the Hanukkah candles. That's a good thing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam.
Amen.
Okay. Now, I'd like to remind you what we're doing in this room. Sometimes you like, where are we? We are at Kesed Israel Torah Center in Sacramento, California. The best shul west of Israel. Okay? And Zev agrees. Now, beyond that, that was a no-brainer. But question is, what is this class about? What we're trying to do is understand how it is that we do the things we do the way a sometimes 2,000-year history of evolution and discussion. Sometimes it could be 3,500 years of history, depending upon what type of practice we're talking about. In the case of Hanukkah, it's not based in the Torah, obviously. It's a rabbinic enactment. Hanukkah postdates the Torah. So we're taking a look at the earliest sources that we have on Hanukkah in terms of the practices of Hanukkah, which in this case is the Talmud. And the first step in analyzing that text is simply to read it and understand it on the simplest level. We could call that in Hebrew parshanut. Right? Lefaresh means to explain, parshanut. But after the step of parshanut, which is just simply to explain the words, we then get to a second step. Now that second step is absolutely necessary for a very simple reason. The Talmud is not a code of Jewish law. It actually doesn't tell you what to do. It's kind of like a very liberal attitude. I don't want to tell you what to do. But I don't think that's why. The Talmud will often present multiple opinions on an issue, and it doesn't tell you which one of those is the law, which one of those is normative. So after we've read the Talmud and we find that there are multiple opinions on any given issue, we understand the words more or less, which can be quite challenging. It's going to take us 3 weeks to just translate the words here, okay, in some kind of comprehensible fashion. Today's the third and hopefully last week in which we'll just be working on the words. So after we do that, then we're going to have to figure out, well, how do we get from the Talmud itself, which has multiple opinions, to what we all universally do today? In this particular case, it's more or less universal, the practice which is going to evolve from the Talmudic discussion. So that's a different area of analysis. That's the area of what we could call in Hebrew psak halacha, the decision, the process of deciding what the law is. So we're going to be able to, Bezrat Hashem, with the help of God, inshallah, be able to familiarize ourselves with are the basic texts of Jewish tradition, the major personalities of Jewish tradition, and how the decision-making process operates. What are the assumptions? What are the methodologies? Right? So, but it's a big task. I guess I'm saying that in order to kind of immunize you from a lot of the frustration which could happen and may have already happened when you're doing this thing, because it's just a lot of work. And sometimes it's hard to remember what you're doing here. Okay, so I'm reminding ourselves what we're doing here. Okay, so let's do a very quick review of what we have seen so far. We saw that the Mishnah in Masechet Shabbat is discussing something that is not related to Hanukkah. It's a different mitzvah altogether. It's the mitzvah of lighting Shabbat candles. And in that passage in the Mishnah, right, Mishnah text edited around the end of the 2nd century. So the Mishnah there is discussing the oils, which are appropriate or inappropriate for lighting the Shabbat candles, and the wicks, which are either appropriate or inappropriate. Okay? That's the Mishnah. It doesn't talk about Shabbat. It doesn't talk about Hanukkah. Let's talk about Shabbat. So then the Talmud says, Talmud, so all the later scholars, not the scholars from the time of the Mishnah. By the way, can anybody remind me what we call the rabbis who are quoted in the Mishnah? There's a name for those rabbis. Well, Tanaim, good, Tanaim. And remember how we explained that really means repeaters. The repeaters, because they are conserving Jewish tradition, they're repeating them, setting them down to memory, organizing them, etc. So the rabbis after the time of the Mishnah, and can anybody remember what they're called? Amoraim. Did I say after the time of the Mishnah?
Yes.
Yeah, Amoraim. Right, the rabbis of the Talmud. Amoraim. They are the talkers, right? They're the analyzers, right? So they're analyzing the Mishnah. Okay, Amoraim. So the Amoraim are looking at that Mishnah, which talks about what are the appropriate wicks and oils. And then they ask themselves the following. Now, by the way, when we say we ask themselves the following, it's not like they were sitting around a table discussing this. They're actually living in different countries and in different times. It's that the editors of the Talmud put it on one page as if they're talking to each other, but they're not. Okay? So these Amoraim then ask themselves the following question. Well, hey, since we're talking about what are the appropriate wicks and oils to use for Shabbat candles, hey, it's December 2nd. Hanukkah's coming soon. I don't think they said exactly that way, but you get the idea. And therefore, what would be the appropriate wicks and oils for lighting the Hanukkah candles? Okay. And we saw in the discussion of the Talmud, if you remember, Shalom, that the Talmud recorded, put you on the spot here, how many opinions? 3 opinions. Whoa, that was good. Okay, so the first opinion was Rav. The second opinion was Rav Chisda. And the third opinion was, did I say Rav first?
Huna.
I meant to say Rav Huna. Okay, I don't know what I said. But Rav Huna, and then the second opinion is Rav Chisda, and third opinion is Rav. Those are the 3 Amoraim. And what are their positions? So we saw that Rav Huna said, well, all of those wicks and oils that one is not allowed to use on Shabbat, okay? So we don't use them for Hanukkah either, neither on a weekday. This is just a review. I hope this sounds familiar. Neither on the weekday, nor if it's lighting for the light that'll burn over the Hanukkah candle for Shabbat, Friday night, right before it gets dark, obviously. Okay, so those oils that are no good for Shabbat are also no good for Hanukkah, whether you're talking about lighting it on a Tuesday night, I'll use as an example, or a Friday night, okay, for Shabbat. Rav Chisda said, all of those oils which are excluded from being kosher for Shabbat, so they are okay if it's Tuesday night, but not okay if it's Friday night. Then the third opinion was Rav. And Rav said, all the oils which are no good for Shabbat, guess what? They're 100% good for Hanukkah, whether it's Tuesday night or Friday night. Okay? So those are the 3 different views on that issue. To what extent are the wicks and oils that are excluded from use for the Shabbat candles, are they excluded from use on the candles for Hanukkah? And it's divided between weeknight of Hanukkah and Friday night of Hanukkah. Fine. Those are 3 opinions. Now, then we saw that though it's not arranged in the way I'm describing it now, that these 3 opinions are then analyzed. See, none of these 3 opinions are explained by the person who presented their views. In other words, the view that said, those Shabbat candles, or the wicks and oils that you can't use for Shabbat candles, you can't use any time on Hanukkah, neither on Tuesday nor Friday night. Doesn't explain why. Well, why not use them? And the opinion that said that those candles, that you can use them on Tuesday night but not on Friday night, no explanation. And the opinion that says that those wicks and candles that you can't use for Shabbat, you can always use them for Hanukkah, whether Friday night or Tuesday night. Those are the three opinions. Doesn't explain. Why not? So later Amoraim then explain perhaps what underlies those three different positions. And we saw that the explanations that are given, right, is after the fact, because those three positions, the author of those positions didn't explain themselves. So people are coming on later and saying, what's behind it? So those three positions are then explained as a function of two different considerations. And those considerations are the following. One issue is, if the candle goes out, we light the Hanukkah candle, and a gust of wind comes in and it blows it out, are we required to relight it according to Jewish law? That's one consideration. The other consideration is, are we allowed to utilize the light of the Hanukkah candle? That was the second consideration. Now, how do those considerations lead to the conclusions about whether inferior wicks and oils are allowed to be used on either a Tuesday night? I use it arbitrarily. So Tuesday night or Friday night. Well, let's do it. Everybody ready? Now, this is just a review still, believe it or not. And by the time we're done with the review, there won't be any time left to go on. That is exactly my strategy. So the explanation is like this. Now, if you remember, the first opinion was Rav Huna. Rav Huna said that those inferior wicks and oils, for the purpose of Shabbat, they're forbidden. So with regards to Hanukkah, they're also forbidden, whether it's Tuesday night or Friday night. Why? I can explain it. It has to do with his position on the two issues of, if the candle goes out, do you have to relight it? And are you allowed to use the light of the Hanukkah candle? How so? Well, Rav Huna holds the following. If, and this you can look at your chart here to follow this, if the candle goes out, you have to relight it. And that explains why on Tuesday night, I'm required to use high quality wicks and oils, because I'm afraid that if a wind comes and blows out the candle, that the person's not going to relight it. And if they don't relight it, they would not have fulfilled the mitzvah. So therefore, the halacha is use superior wicks and oils, which will have the least possible chance of blowing out. High quality, more stable flame, more secure flame. Now, the second issue, which is, are you allowed to use the light of the Hanukkah candles? That is the reason behind the fact that you can't use these inferior wicks and oils on Friday night. Why? Since you're allowed to benefit from the light of the Hanukkah candles, according to Rav Huna. So let's say you're reading your favorite book late on Friday night after you've had a delicious dinner at the Clay's home, gourmet French Shabbat cooking. And so you're feeling all nice and warm and cozy, a little cold outside. So you wrap yourself up in your down blanket and you're sitting there on the couch and you curl up next to the Hanukkah candle, right, which is burning in the background, and you're going to use it to read by it. And remember, we're talking about it in those days. Until modern times, candles were made out of oil with a wick in it. So let's say that it was an inferior quality oil and wick. It's a very dim light. Well, nowadays, let's say you had a three-way bulb, right? And it's on the lowest, and kind of, want to get a little bit more light, shed some light on the issue, turn up to the second on your three-way bulb. Anybody ever use those anymore? Or they have these things, these whatever called, these things you can, dimmer, you can increase light. The same thing. Okay. So, but in ancient times, you didn't use a dimmer, right? So you just tried to get more oil to flow into the wick. So you're all in your snug as a bug, in your down blanket, in your reading your favorite book, and you reach over and you're trying because you want to increase the light a little bit. Oh no, it's Shabbat, I forgot. Because if you increase the flame on Shabbat, so that's one of the 39 activities we don't do in Shabbat. Okay, so that explains why you can't use the inferior wicks and oils, neither on Tuesday night or Friday night, according to Rav Huna. Now, we had another opinion, which was the opinion of Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said that he started to have a split view, that the inferior stuff can be used on Tuesday night, but not Friday night. Well, how do you explain that? Same two considerations. So he holds that if it blows out accidentally, you actually don't have to relight it. It was enough to relight it the first time, and after 5 minutes, wind comes and blows it out. It's okay, no problem. You fulfilled the mitzvah anyway. Okay, just the mere lighting does the mitzvah. So if that's true, we don't have to worry about high quality, secure flame on Tuesday night because we're not worried about it'll blow out and he'll neglect to relight it because you don't have to relight it according to him. If it blows out, you don't have to relight it. Now, but he says on Friday night, I do want you to use the highest quality wicks and oils. Why? Because he holds, like the previous opinion, that you are allowed to use the light. And so therefore the same problem. You're reading your book and you want to increase the light, you'll reach over and tilt the candle and increase the flame. Then we had a third opinion, the third opinion of Rav. Rav says that inferior wicks and oils are allowed to be used always. You can use those lousy wicks and oils on Tuesday night and even on Friday night. How to explain that? No problem. It's because of those two factors again. He says if it blows out, you don't need to relight it, just like Rav Chisda. So if doing the mitzvah is accomplished by simply lighting it, and it doesn't matter that it blows out 5 minutes later, so therefore you can use inferior wicks and oils on Tuesday night. Now, why are you allowed to use inferior wicks and oils on Friday night? Because on the second issue of are you allowed to use the light of the Hanukkah candle, he says you're not allowed to. Jewish law forbids the utilization of the light of a Hanukkah candle. So you're not going to sit next to the Hanukkah candle to read from. It's not allowed. So since it's not allowed, what are we not worried about? You're not worried about a poor quality flame that you might want to increase because you're not allowed to use the light of the Hanukkah candle. It's just to sit there and to smile at it and say, ooh, that reminds me of a big miracle. But you can't utilize it in a utilitarian fashion, right? So that explains why you're always allowed, according to Rav, to use inferior wicks and oils because of those two considerations. So far, so good? Okay. Now, last time, we then added another factor, which I don't want to even get into because I'm just afraid it's going to confuse me. And that is, we tried to just understand a little bit deeper level why you need those two considerations, because at first glance, you really don't need both considerations. Actually, you only need the first consideration of if it goes out, you have to relight it, because that could explain in every case why it is that you, or at least according to Rav Huna, why it is that you always must use high quality wicks and oils, because if you hold it, you must relight it. I'll just say it quickly. If you hold it, you must relight it, right? If it goes out, that's why you have to use high quality wicks on Tuesday. Also, of course, on Friday too, because if it goes out, you light right before the sun starts to set, right? So you light it. Now, if it goes out, guess what? Even if you remembered, you notice it went out and you remembered, I'm supposed to relight it. Well, what's the problem? It's Shabbos. You can't relight it even if you wanted to. So that one consideration would explain everything. But so we tried to explain last week why it is that in explaining these opinions, including Rav Huna, that the Talmud says, there's a second consideration. Why do you use second consideration? But we're not going to go over that again. Okay. Now we're going to do is go back in the Talmud. We'll go back in the Talmud And we're going to read on in the Talmudic discussion. And there is a fascinating little tiny paragraph here which defies explanation. It's good Mo is here because he'll be able to explain it to us. So if you'll take a look at your Talmudic text here, we're now going to read on. Okay. So in the English, it's where it says, the rabbi stated this before Abaye in Rabbi Yirmiyah's name. Okay, everybody see that? It's about 2/3 down the page, the first word in the line. The rabbi stated this before Abaye in Rabbi Jeremiah's name. Everybody see that? Okay.
We don't have it.
Okay, so there you go.
There you go, brother.
Okay. And in the Hebrew, it's where it says, Amaruha Rabbanan Kamei Abaye. It's actually in Aramaic. Okay. So that is in the Hebrew text that we have in front of us. 8 lines from the bottom of the page. Amaruha Rabbanan Kamei Abaye. Okay. Now remember, we have these 3 opinions, right? Rav Huna, Rav Chisda, and Rav.
What's wrong? You're talking 0, right?
Yeah, except remember we mentioned last week that when you have a chain of transmission, like Rabbi Zera said in the name of so-and-so, in this case, Rav, when we refer to that opinion, we don't call it Rabbi Zera's opinion, call it Rav, because he's just quoting Rav. Okay. You see where it says that Rabbi Zera said in the name of Rav Matan, and then it says, and some people say Rabbi Zera in the name of Rav. Right, okay. So that's where we're going to call it Rav. Okay? Gotcha. So now we're going to read, we're going to translate, and we're going to try to explain. Amaruha Rabbanan Kamei Abaye, Mishmei de Rabbi Yirmiyah. The rabbis, they're a bunch of rabbis. They went before Abaye. The rabbi named Abaye. And they related the opinion of Rav, the previous opinion that we just saw. It's a third of the 3. What did Rav say? Rav said, you can always use inferior wicks and oils on Chanukah. Why? Because he holds of the 2 views that if the candles went out, you don't need to relight them. That's why on Tuesday you can use inferior wicks and oils. And on Friday night, what's the issue there? He holds that you're not allowed to use the light. Therefore, there is no possibility that you'll come to tilt the jar of oil to increase the magnitude of the flame. So therefore, because of those 2 assumptions, Rav says you're always allowed to use inferior wicks and oils. So a bunch of rabbis came before the great scholar Abaye, and they related this position and its explanations in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, in the name of Rabbi Jeremiah. That is not the prophet Jeremiah. And it is certainly not the bullfrog, if you know what I mean.
They're too young.
I know they are. The Lo Kibla. And Abaye said, I don't accept this view. Cannot be. I refuse. Got that? So Rav's position and the explanation of that position was related to Abaye in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, meaning Rabbi Yirmiyah, they went before Abaye and said, hey, Abaye, we want to tell you something about what Rav said, and we know this because Rabbi Yirmiyah told us. And Abaye said, don't believe it. So far, so good?
So far.
Let's go on. Ki ata ravin amaruha rabbanan kamei Abaye mishmei de Rabbi Yochanan v'kibla. Then Talmud says that when Ravin came from Eretz Israel to the land of Israel to Babylonia, so the rabbis said the exact same explanation to Abaye about the position of Rav in the name of Rabbi Yochanan this time. The exact same words, but instead of being in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. And Abaye said, Kibla. This time I accept it. Okay, so let's just review the facts. Twice, Abaye is informed of Rav's position on this issue. One time in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, one time in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. When he heard it in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, he said, I don't accept it. When he heard the name of Rabbi Yochanan, he accepted it. Now, I have to just explain one little, hang on one second, say one little detail here, which is interesting detail. When it talks about how the second time he was told of Rav's opinion, the exact same opinion, right? But it was not in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, but in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. It's prefaced by when Ravin came. When Ravin came. So that expression, Kiata Ravin, it literally means in Aramaic, when Ravin came. But it's a code word. That's part of the problem of Talmud. Because even if, let's say, your name was Mo, and you had a PhD in Aramaic from UC Berkeley, let's just say. So it wouldn't help. You could translate every single word, but it's a code. So Kiata Ravin, when Ravin came. Okay, when he came. Okay, great, when he came. So him and other rabbis went before Abaye and explained Rav's opinion in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and Abaye said, I'll take it. Okay. You know that back in those days, that to a certain extent, it's analogous to what happens nowadays. You know, I hope I won't offend any other great centers of Jewish life like London, Paris, or Brussels, whatever. But the two main centers of Jewish life are the Holy Land, right? Especially Jerusalem.
And New York.
And Sacramento, of course. Okay, that's no news there.
Very good.
Okay, so and people would go back and forth. There were great yeshivot in Babylonia and great yeshivot in the land of Israel, just like there are great yeshivot in the United States and great yeshivot in the land of Israel. And people felt a special kind of merit and privilege to go to the land of Israel and to learn from the rabbis that are in Israel. And then they would go back to Babylonia and talk about all the Torah they learned. Matter of fact, I think in my own personal life, I think I'm sort of, right? Yeah, because I go back and forth, right? And of course, what happens is that, I teach something that I learned from a rabbi in Israel. That's what happened. Kiata Ravin doesn't mean he came. It means when Ravin came back to Babylonia after being in Eretz Israel, in which he received these very authoritative traditions from the rabbis in Eretz Israel, that's what it always means, Kiata Ravin. That phrase, Kiata Ravin, when Ravin came, it's all over the Talmud, hundreds of times. As a matter of fact, Mo can tell you exactly how many times just by memory. I don't know about Mo, but there are great like Rabbi Avad Yosef, he could. Without a computer, he just, okay, give me a second. 452 times. I'm not joking about that. Okay, so now that's important to appreciate. Why? Because the rabbis in Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, even though sort of from a political, economic point of view, especially after the Bar Kokhba rebellion, or I should say the crushing of the Bar Kokhba rebellion in the middle of the 2nd century of the Common Era, things were kind of going south, as they say. But from the point of view of authority, the rabbis in Eretz Israel had greater authority. It was considered to be, they're more in a very direct line of receiving of the traditions. Okay, that's why I think I mentioned this the first time we met a few weeks ago, that the title Rabbi was only given to the rabbis in the land of Israel. Outside of the land of Israel, you couldn't get real smicha. You were just called Rav, which was kind of an honorary title. But Rabbi was reserved for the rabbis in the land of Israel, who were part of this direct chain of transmission of traditions in the Holy Land. So you notice that when Abaye hears the Rav's position in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, he kind of blows it off. Is that the expression? And then when Ravin comes back from Eretz Israel, and then Abai hears, he says, ooh, okay, now I accept it. Okay. Now, I want to finish off this little paragraph, and then I want to try to explain why didn't Abaye, it's the exact same position, right? Whether you attribute this explanation to Rabbi Yirmiyah or Rabbi Yochanan, in one case, Abaye rejected it. In the second case, because it came from Rabbi Yochanan, he accepted it. Like, truth is the truth. If I tell you the earth is flat, it is flat. Okay, maybe not. But, it doesn't matter who says it. We should look at things as a function of the truth of the statement, not who says it, don't you think? The Rambam makes a very big point out of this in his writing. He says we have to accept the truth from no matter where it comes from, right? So he would quote, non-Jewish philosophers, because if it's true, it's true. Okay, so this is mysterious. Why did Abai not accept the same exact position when it was presented upon the authority of Rabbi Yirmiyah, but then accept it when it was presented in the authority of Rabbi Yochanan? Okay, so we'll return to that in a minute. Then the Talmud goes on. After Abaye accepted it, right, this view of Rav, which was presented in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, right, and he had previously not accepted it in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah. So the Talmud says that he said, Amar, Izakai, if I had merited, Gemirte lishmate miikara, this is all Aramaic here, I would have learned it from the outset. In other words, I would have, instead of not accepting it the first time, it's like someone comes up to you and says, that fish is not kosher. Nah, I don't believe it. 5 years later, someone says, that fish is not kosher. You're right. I wish I would have known 5 years ago. Well, Dodo, you did know. Someone told you it. You were just too stubborn to accept it. So that's what he's saying here. I mean, I'm reading too much into it, but at least the words. Izakai, if I would have merited, I would have accepted Rav's position with its explanation the first time I heard it in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, instead of having to only years later hear it again in the name of Rabbi Yochanan and only then accepting it. So the Talmud says, now it's just asking a question about Abaye's statement. V'hagamra, why is he so upset that the first time he heard it, when it was quoted in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, he didn't accept that position? But the second time he heard it, he did. And he's like lamenting it. Like, if I'd merited it, I would have accepted it the first time I heard it. I mean, at the end of the day, he got the correct information and he accepted it and everything is good. I mean, he got it. Like, he finally accepted the right opinion. And who cares that the first time he was told it, that he didn't accept it? Talmud says, Nafkamina legirsa diankuta. You know what the difference is? The value of learning when you're young. I think I need a stiff drink on that one.
There you go.
I got my own. So this is a rather cryptic passage in the Talmud. There's something that is called girsa de'ankuta. It's an Aramaic phrase, which means the learning when you're young. Our sages in the Mishnah said, you know what it's like when you learn when you're young? It's like writing on old, worn-out parchment. Wait, did I say that right? When you're young, it's like writing. Sorry, I think got it. When you're young, it's like writing on fresh parchment that the ink is absorbed and sticks just perfect. It sets. The writing sets. If you want to write a Sefer Torah, you're writing on hide. Yeah, it has to be good quality hide, and But imagine that you're writing on hide. It's like been sitting in the sun for 5 years and it's all wrinkled and cracked and dried out. Don't start crying. You're not old, wrinkled, and cracked.
Speak for yourself.
Well, I don't know. Maybe a little bit. God bless you, Mo. He's not older than you, right yet.
Yeah, long way to go.
Oh, you realize what you've done to the average age in this room? God bless
On
you.
a bell curve. Yeah.
So when you learn something when you're young, it sticks. And I shouldn't say that. I've experienced this, like something that you learn when you're young. I mean, even silly things, multiplication tables, like it doesn't go away. You don't have to think what's 9 times 4. It's like, it's 32, right? Because you know it.
No.
That's a joke, right? So it's something that because it's like, right? It's just, right? So, but like, when's the last time you tried to learn a foreign language? After the age of whatever, or almost anything, like I just found out my sister's trying to learn the piano, and she's almost 70 years old. I mean, it's wonderful, and God bless her, and but it just, now if you played piano when you were young and you keep playing, so that's fantastic. And whose 70th birthday was just celebrated? The great Israeli violinist, Yitzhak Perlman, who's still a fantastic, fantastic violinist. But that's because when he was knee high, he was playing the fiddle, right? But it's not going to work if you do not take up the violin after you're 60, okay? Unless you don't have neighbors, okay? This is the same thing with Torah. That's the same thing with Torah. That Abaye is saying, you know what? I had a chance to learn the correct way of thinking about a certain issue when I was young, and it really would have stuck to me and would have been part of kind of my database, put into my hard drive, right? And now, like, I finally saw the light. I'm older, and the hard drive doesn't work so well anymore. And so that's how one way of explaining this particular passage in the Talmud. So far, so good. So now I want to return to the more fascinating question is, why is it that Abaye did not accept the explanation of Rav when he heard it in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, but he did accept it when he heard the name of Rabbi Yochanan? Now, the simple explanation is the following, even though it's not so simple. And a lot of ink has been spilled on this issue, believe it or not. So, and I don't want to get too buried deep into this issue because we'll never come out of it. But the simple explanation is that Rabbi Yochanan was a much more authoritative scholar than Rabbi Yirmiyah. So when he heard the name Rabbi Yirmiyah, he said, When he heard the name Rabbi Yochanan, okay. So now everybody can appreciate that, right? That's why there's something called your local Orthodox rabbi and Rav Moshe Feinstein, a blessed memory, or Rabbi Avad Yosef, right? They're both Orthodox rabbis, but not really. But they're both Orthodox, put it that way, right? It's one thing for Joel's F to say something. It's another thing for Rav Moshe Feinstein to say something. And it could be just by fluke. They could even say the same thing, exactly the same thing. But if Rav Moshe Feinstein says it, there's a lot behind that, as they say in Carmichael, gravitas. There's a lot of gravitas there. If Joel's F says it, okay, he's a local Orthodox rabbi, LOR.
We always believe you're right.
God bless you. Checks in the mail. Simone, you're not the president for nothing. That is the first qualification to be president.
But we do that now.
Good
If
attitude.
somebody's got a degree and they can say the same thing as someone that doesn't, then they're more believed.
Yeah, that's true. If you want a Nobel Prize, you somehow greater ability than if. Okay, fine. So that's the simple explanation. Now, I dug around quite a bit to look into this more deeply. I'm going to share something with you, and I didn't see anybody who says it. This is a sure sign it's probably not true. However, it's a lot of fun. So I'm going to share with you the Joel Zeff theory of why Abaye didn't accept the view of Rabbi Yirmiyah but he did accept the same teaching when he heard it in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, everybody ready?
Great.
So,
The world premiere of this concept?
yes, I mean, put it this way. If it's true, then I'm sure somebody else said it, and I just didn't find it. And more likely, I didn't find it because it's probably nonsense. But what the heck? I'm in Sacramento. I can get away with it. Okay. Except I'm being recorded.
Oh, is he bring? Okay.
Okay. Everybody ready? Okay. I want to learn a Mishnah, not from Tractate Shabbat, not from my second Shabbat, from a different Masechet altogether. Okay. Yeah, just share. Okay. Now, this particular Mishnah is dealing with a
Pigeon.
wandering pigeon. Okay, so let's say that Marguerite is walking along and she finds on the ground a young pigeon. So can she take it home and have it for dinner? Okay, I forgot she's a vegan. Okay, so let's learn the Mishnah. Everybody ready? Nipola nimtza betoch 50 amah. A young pigeon. Now, I'm going to read a little bit into this just to hopefully make this easier. We're talking about such a young pigeon. I really don't know too much about pigeons, but the Talmud suggests that these are young pigeons. They don't really fly too well. They kind of hop around more than fly around. Okay? So Marguerite's walking along, and there's this pigeon is kind of hopping around. So, and she wants to, could she take it home and have it for dinner? So the halacha is the following, according to the Mishnah. So if it's found, betoch 50 amah, if it was found within 50 cubits of a dovecote, I think that's what pigeon houses are called. Okay, in English. So in that case, harehu shel bal hashovach, the pigeon must be assumed to belong to the owner of the farmer who's raising these pigeons in a dovecote. Fine. Chutz mi 50 amah, but if Marguerite found the pigeon and it's further than 50 cubits from the nearest dovecote, hare hu shel motzao. It belongs to Marguerite, so says the Mishnah. Okay. Now, what's the reasoning behind this? The reasoning behind this is that there is a presumption that we make all the time in halacha. You see, every legal system has to make certain axiomatic assumptions that don't necessarily have anything to do with well, they have something to do with reality, but you have to, I'll give you an example. Here on the street on Morse Avenue in sunny Sacramento, city of the trees, where I recommend everybody move to. If you're not going to move to Israel, you should move to Sacramento, unless you have allergies. So on Morse Avenue, I've noticed that the speed limit is 65 miles an hour. Okay. Now now where does 65 come from? Like I'm joking, of course, but let's say so. There's a sign 65 miles an hour. So somewhere experts got together and they said that these streets can be safely navigated at 65. So theoretically speaking, it's not going to happen, but theoretically, if you were going 66 miles an hour, I mean, theoretically, you can get a ticket. Now, what's the difference between 65 and 66? Nothing. And most of the time, the police are not going to bother you a few miles over. Okay? But you can't function in the world if you don't draw a line somewhere. And the line is based upon some kind of rational criteria, but it's ultimately, there's a certain arbitrariness to it just because you have to draw it somewhere. So if you'll take a look in the next passage of the Talmud, where this is now where the Talmud is going to explain the assumption behind the Mishnah. Hachaba ma'askin, an Aramaic phrase. Here in the Mishnah, what are we dealing with? Midada. it's talking about these young pigeons that they just hop around. They can't go very far. The Amar Rav Ukva Bar Chama, because Rav Ukva Bar Chama, this rabbi said, Kol midada, these little pigeons that hop around, ein midada yoter me chamishim amah. They, generally speaking, are not going to distance themselves from home sweet home more than 50 cubits. I mean, if it's a eagle, so it could have come from anywhere because they're good flyers. But these little things hop around. So that's why we now understand the first part of the Mishnah. Because if you find this little pigeon and you're within 50 cubits of someone's industrial pigeon factory over there, it probably came from there. Makes sense. That's why Marguerite cannot take it home for dinner. But if she finds it outside further than 50 cubits, so then she can keep it. Okay, because you don't have to assume that it came. It's just a feral pigeon. Okay, fine. So now let's go back to the Mishnah. Okay, back up to the first source. So now the Mishnah says, I'll give you another case, right? The first case was if Marguerite finds it within 50 cubits of a dovecote, it belongs to the owner of the dovecote. She can't keep it. If it's more than 50, we presume that it didn't come from that dovecote. It's a feral pigeon, and she can keep it. Okay? Now, next case. Next case is the following. Nimtza bein shnei shovachot. What would happen if the following scenario happened? She finds this little pigeon hopping around. She knows the law. Within 50 cubits of a dovecote, it belongs to the owner of the dovecote, right?
Okay.
Outside of 50, she can keep it. What would happen if she finds it? Okay. She says, I studied this passage in the Mishnah. Can I keep it or not keep it? Okay. Right over there, I see there's a dovecote belonging to somebody. Okay. Let's say it's 25 cubits over there. And over there, oh no, there's another dovecote owned by a different farmer. It's also 25 cubits away. So what do you do in a case like that? So the Mishnah says, mechza mechza. I skipped a few words. If it's a case like that, 25 cubits to that guy's dovecote, 25 cubits. So Marguerite can't have it. But now, what about the two owners of the dovecotes? Each one of them can say, it's mine. The other says, no, it's mine. And where is it found? Equidistant between the two. And it could have come from either because it's within 50 cubits. And they hop around up to, but not over 50 cubits, right? So what's the Mishnah say? Yachloku. Cut it in half. And each one gets to eat half of a grilled pigeon for dinner.
That's why they wear little rings.
Oh, that's true. So you can identify where it came from. Okay. This is assuming that, it doesn't have a ring on it. Okay. Okay, fine. Okay, now go back to the second passage now. Now remember the explanation? It has to do with this assumption that it can't hop around usually more than 50. And again, is there such a thing as an Olympic super buff pigeon that can actually hop more than 50? There probably is. And there's probably pigeons that, sit around drinking lemonade and don't want to go anywhere, that don't hop, right? But we're making kind of a thing. They hop and they don't go more than 50. So now the Talmud says the following. By Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah asked. So the rabbis were in the Beit Midrash, right, in the study hall, and they're all discussing this. And Rabbi Yirmiyah, that's Rabbi Jeremiah. That's our friend. Remember who he's the rabbi that when Abaye heard Rav's view in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, he said, When he heard Rabbi Yochanan, he said, okay. So the Talmud now records a story about Rabbi Yirmiyah. So Rabbi Yirmiyah, he raised his hand. Colleagues, I have a serious question I'd like to contemplate. What about the following case? Raglo echat betoch 50 amah. Raglo echat chutz mi-50 amah. Mahu. What would happen if Margarita's walking along and she finds a little pigeon there? And guess what? She does her quick sizing up. There is a professional industrial dovecote over there. It's 50 cubits away. The only problem is the pigeon's 2 feet are straddling the end line of the 50 cubits. One leg of the pigeon is within 50. Well, if I look at that side of the pigeon, Marguerite can't have pigeon for dinner. It's got to go back to the dovecote. But if I look at the left leg of the pigeon, so then it's outside the 50 cubits, right? So this was his profound question that he asked in the Beit Midrash. So he said, Mahu, what's the law, my fine feathered friends? What's the law on this? So the Talmud says, Ve'alda afkuha l'Rabbi Yirmiyah mi Beit Midrasha. For that question, they threw him out of the yeshiva.
They should have done what King Solomon did. Split in half.
See, if a rock dove can only hop, then it's a fledgling. It's not even a full grown.
So they kicked him out because they didn't have an answer for him.
Okay, so now, of course, the question is like, why'd they throw him out? So Mo understands why they threw him out. It's actually kind of a funny passage in the Talmud. I have a book at home, like on Jewish humor, and it quotes this passage in the Talmud, like a funny passage in the Talmud. It's kind of funny. So why did they throw him out? So there's two theories. One theory is, this is what Rashi says. I think, did I quote? I think I didn't put it in yours. Rashi says, "Va'al da afkuha shahaya matriach aleim," because he's just being a pain in the neck. That's why. He's just being a nudnik. Have you ever been in a conversation with somebody or taught a class or public speaking or anything, and there's someone who asks questions? We have a university teacher here. They actually have no real sincere desire to know the answer to the question. They're just being what we call in French a nudnik. A nudnik.
I've had lots of nudnik.
Okay, so that's what Rashi seems to say, that Rabbi Yirmiyah is a nudnik. What a okay, like right. 1 foot is on within 50. 1 foot is okay. So Tosfot actually has there's another commentary has a kind of a more nuanced understanding of what was wrong with this question. It's really interesting because remember we said before that the way any legal system works is you have to draw the line somewhere.
Right.
Now we made a principle, and we read that principle when we talked about the Mishnah. That principle said, how far can baby pigeons walk or hobble or whatever they do, hop from the dovecote? We made a principle. That's why if you find it within 50, it belongs to the owner of the dovecote. If you find it outside of 50, it belongs to you. The assumption being because they can only distance themselves from their home, they can only walk 50 cubits. That's it. That's all they're capable of. So the fact that he said, wait a second, what if this pigeon walked 50 and a half? One foot is outside. So that question, according to the way Tosfot explains it, is impudent because it's like a definitional impossibility because it can't happen. Now, obviously, in real life, it could happen, but it's sort of like, the speed limit is 65, right? We just had to draw the line. So we made a halachic assumption that this is how far they go. So if Rabbi Yochanan or Rabbi Yirmiyah says, but what if it did? What if it went a little bit further? Don't bother me with a question like that because it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen halachically in the halachic construct. So hang on 1 second, okay? Okay, fine. So guess what happened to Rabbi Yirmiyah's career?
Fired.
He's exiled. Okay, he's thrown out. He's thrown out. So now guess what? There's a happy ending. Because in much later in the Talmud, it tells a really interesting story. There was a certain discussion, doesn't matter what it's about, Shalchule chevraya l'Rabbi Yirmiyah. Happened to be Rabbi Yirmiyah was very smart. You know, sometimes the smartest students are the biggest nudniks, right? That's a dangerous combination. You know, if they're just an idiot and they ask, you know, and they're a nudnik, okay. But what happens if they're like a nudnik but they actually are smart? Then like it's more of a challenge for the teacher, because you know this question is not a real question. On the other hand, all the other students will think it's a great, brilliant question, but you just want to shoot. All right, a bad image there. So anyway, so he was smart. So it happened to be the rabbis were dealing with some questions. Someone said, you know what, Rabbi Yirmiyah, he's a good person to answer this question. He's really smart. And the only problem is he's over flipping hamburgers at McDonald's because we threw him out of the yeshiva. So McDovitz. No. So they went and got him. Hey, Rabbi Yirmiyah, I know we weren't so nice to you a few years back, and you're flipping hamburgers in McDovitz since then. But look, we got a problem in Jewish law. We need your opinion. So so they went and asked him, and he answered v'shalach lehu. He said, "Okay, ani eni kedai shatem shalachtem li. I'm not worthy of you coming to ask me a question. Ella kach dat talmidchem nota. But you know what? If you're asking me, your student thinks the following." Wow. How does he?
That's very humble pie.
Exactly. He is so humble now. And of course, the assumption was that when he was thrown out is because he was a little arrogant. Okay. So he seemed, what did he just accomplish? Will we call that teshuva? He did shuva, he repented. Okay. So then the Talmud says, Va'alda ailuhu l'Rabbi Yirmiyah b'vei midrasha. Because of that, they returned him back into the yeshiva. They gave him his job back. Okay. So that's the story of Rabbi Yirmiyah. Now this is a different book of the Talmud altogether. But it occurred to me that this could explain when Abaye heard the explanation of Rav in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah. It was at a stage when he was flipping burgers at McDovitz, right? Because he got thrown to the Beit Midrash for his impudent question. And so when he heard this tradition cited in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, said, not compelling. When he heard the exact same thing in the Rabbi Yochanan was a very important and honored sage without a colorful past like this. So then Abaye said, "Oh, okay, now accept it." But then he said, "You know what? Now that I accept it, it's kind of a little bit of a bummer that I mean, the truth is the truth. Maybe I should have accepted it when I first heard it, because it's always better to learn something when you're younger than when you're older." Okay, so we're going to pause here, and we have just a little bit more to go with reading the Talmud, and we'll finish that next week. And it'll be Hanukkah. Can everybody make it next Wednesday? I'm not everybody, but whatever. We'll have a quorum, right? Have enough people. And what we'll do starting next week is then to go to the second level of analysis, and that is, you realize we have a dispute about those inferior wicks and oils, right? Can they be used on Tuesday or Friday? It's a three-way dispute. We also have a dispute about if wind blows out your Hanukkah candles, do you have to relight them or not? That was a dispute in the Talmud. What's the law, and how do we get to the law? So that process of determining psak halacha, what actually is the normative practice, how do we get from the Talmud, which doesn't take a stand, to the Shulchan Aruch, the code of law? That will be starting next week. And until then, I want to wish everybody a freilich and Hanukkah, a wonderful, joyous, a lichtich Hanukkah, a light-filled Hanukkah, and Chag Urim, the light of flames, and just a little bit of light pushes away much darkness. And I will see you next week, Be'ezrat Hashem.